Welcome to Athletes, Entrepreneurs, the Alumni Journey. I'm Rob Finkelstein, founder and CEO of Alumni Direct, and we've created a platform to help alumni network and connect through their affinity groups, whether it's college alumni, could be business alumni association, or athletes. We give them a place to go. But more importantly, this show is all about teaching aspiring athletes that there is life after sports. So we'll interview former collegiate athletes, professional athletes, talk about their journey. And today we're really excited to have on with us Terrance Dennis. How you doing today?
What's going on, man? I'm good. I can't complain. I'm blessed.
That's great. And we're going to be fired up on this one because Terrance is a great guy. He played college football at the University of Missouri. And then once he got out of school, played a little bit in indoor football league. And then he went on to get into the mental health space and education. Ultimately, he got back into coaching. And so he's a coach now at University of Central Missouri and doing a great job for them. So what we'd like to do is we talk about how sports shaped your life growing up, like leading up into college.
So for me, man, it's a lot of different things for me. Sports is kind of always I don't know, it sounds cliche. You could call it an outlet, things of that nature. But one thing that was big for me whenever I was growing up was just kind of watching, other guys and their dads. I never had a dad, things like that. So I would naturally just gravitate to guys like coaches. And probably one of the big reasons why I coach today is because of the lessons and things that I learned along the way from them. But for me, just a lot of the anger, a lot of things of how I grew up, everything from foster care, adoption, things of that nature. I wanted sports to be my thing. Football was always my thing. I tried all the different things you could think of, from track, football, basketball, soccer, all the different things that you could think of a little boy would want to do. But for me, growing up, it was sports. And I knew that if I didn't get the grades right, the sports would go, and lessons learned in those areas. But for me, everything that you could think of in terms of security, everything you could think of in terms of having a positive influence that looked like me, especially where I grew up in, kind of that southern Kansas City area, it helped to have an outlet, or at least hindsight's 2020, looking back and seeing something like that as an outlet to really just express who I was.
Yeah, no, that's great. And you hear a lot of it, just the whole various backgrounds for all, but just it seems like it certainly impacted kind of who you are today. So let's talk. I always ask the fun question is, did you dream about being a professional athlete? I'm assuming you did, being an NFL player, but what was your take on that?
I really didn't dream about it as much as the average kid probably would have. You grow up, you have heroes. I mean, mine was like Tony Gonzalez. I got to go to his camps. I got to meet a couple Chiefs players and people like that came to my school just to hang out with kids. And I never really saw myself like, wow, one day I'm going to be like that guy. It was always, what was right in front of me. Of course, I thought it in the end where it's like, okay, like now I'm in high school thinking about going to college. Now I'm at a major college. Like, this thing is getting kind of real right now. Maybe this is something I could actually do. But it was more or less, dare I say, idolizing like the guys on my posters on my wall, and just be like, man, that dude's great where he's at. He's a good guy for the Chiefs when Chiefs weren't that great. And for me, I always could see it, just because I felt like I could always step up to the occasion in the different areas that I was, from high school to different teams and leagues to even Mizzou, playing at a level like that. It was one of those things where I was at is where I don't know, I felt comfortable. It's where I wanted to learn. It's where my feet were planted. But yeah, but I can also say this is that whenever people would tell me, like, you know what, T, like, there's only 1% of the 1% of these guys that actually make it, I never once cared about percentages or likelihood or anything like that. I just felt like, yo, if I'm here, I'm going to do it. And that's where it happened. That's where it was for me when it came to the dream of playing professional football. I knew I was good at other things, but I didn't let that deter me one way or the other in terms of, hey, this is it. This is it. I'm going to die on this rock. It was never that.
Yeah, okay. And I think that's good, and that probably plays a lot into just the transitioning out, makes it a little bit easier too, because you're right. It's such a small percentage of people that do make it to that level. For me, I was a runner in high school and college, and never, I didn't see myself going to that next level. I always dreamed about being a baseball player. Unfortunately, skill set wasn't there, so I'm doing what I'm doing today. So let's talk. Let's get into college now, and one of the
Sure.
big things that we talk about is, with these issues ultimately of athletes transitioning out of sports, whether it's collegiately or professionally. What kind of education did they have when you were playing in Missouri? What was there specific curriculum that talked to athletes across all sports, or is that something that might not have existed then, but maybe exists today?
I think now it's kind of gotten multifaceted now. It's probably more refined than it was. I know when we first came in, there were courses that they eventually started bringing in of former student athletes, maybe ones that went to the NFL or people in our athletics department that would actually sit down with all the freshmen. It would literally be a class that you have to take in terms of basically this is how you do college, and this is how you do college as a student athlete here at Mizzou. Here's where you can find different things. Here's what to expect. But at the same time, it was also one of those things where I was really blessed to be able to go to a Power Five school because of all the resources we had. So, athletics department, you have your football team, you have all the other sports, but we also had an academic side. It was our total person program, is what we called it. So basically, teaching and going after the total person outside of athletics. No one really made you feel bad for wanting to have that dream of going to play or run or do something at the professional level, but it was more or less like, hey, this is how you construct a resume. We would have tutors like, hey, this is how you can write this paper a little bit better. There were always these little things, and people get that misconception of athletes were coddled and things of that nature. That's the thing. But until you hear it all the time. Until you can wake up at 5 in the morning and go to class after you're done lifting, go to 8 a.m. class, then you have practice, then you're not done until 8 p.m. There's really nothing much you can tell a student athlete at this level. So for us, I never saw it as coddling. It was more or less, hey, while the average student is going to class and doing all of these other things, or maybe even just waking up in the morning or having some free time at night, like we're grinding, like
Yeah.
we're doing all these things. We need someone to sit us down and say, hey man, like this is time for academics. This is your time. Yes, sports are here, and it helped that it was within our actual athletics department to where they could say, hey man, look, we're going to give you these study hall hours, not as a punishment, but if you want tutors, if you want study hall, by all means, please do it. This is what we got it here for, a structured time in our day. And that helped us in terms of, here's what life can look like after college. Plus, we would have people come back and just, talk to us. I mean, we've had guest speakers from NFL Hall of Famers. We've had guest speakers from NFL Hall of Famers to Michael Francis. So it like guys and that could come back and talk to us about like, hey, this is real life. Yes, you hear it all the time that football can teach you all of these things, but we had something for all athletes, and we had something specifically for football being the biggest sport
Right.
to say, you know what, even in the midst of all this, here's all the things you're good at. Let's go ahead and try to doctor some of those things up.
Yeah, and I think probably a big factor too is whether the athlete wants to spend the time getting that. Because I mean, I guess that's another thing I gather is that there are some resources and probably better today, but it's up to the athlete. And I don't know, like, would you say there's a difference between like say the top players on a team versus the maybe the second or third stringers as far as their mentality of like looking at that education?
Yes and no. I would say for the ones that are actually being sought after, the ones that are in the news headlines, the ones that are all over Twitter, the ones that everybody's talking about. Oh, they just shut off some lights. But I think for those people, it was more or less okay. Yes, I can get my degree, but at the same time, you know what? There's also this other thing. I get to kind of play my game. I get to do my sport. I get to do what I wanted to do, what I came here on a scholarship to do. And I can't even speak to that. I was a walk on, but it's one of those things that those guys kind of think of it a little bit differently, right? And ultimately, you see a lot of them come back to actually get their degree. Or in a situation when I went on to play some arena ball in the midst of, getting calls back and things like that from NFL teams, I had a professor who let me finish out, my big paper that got me my master's, kind of do some stuff online. He was like, hey man, if you got the opportunity to make millions of dollars, like by all means, I'm not going to make you always come to class. Like, as long as you're doing what we're doing, following the syllabus and keeping good communication, then yeah, heck yeah, do what you got to do. But this is important. and it was important. So for me, I don't really see a ton of difference between it. And if I'm honest, everybody from what I saw got the same treatment when it came from, the All-American to the person who just walked in off the street, athlete, just run-of-the-mill type of, camp filler or body to have on the team. Everybody got the same. And if there was even an inkling that a guy up top, from what I saw, at least in my room, at least on our team with the time I was at Mizzou, if there was even an inkling, then they would be like, okay, here's my little paper. Hey, man, how's that math class doing, Mr. First Team All-American? And then just make sure you at study hall. That's all I'm going to say. And it was one of those things. So it helped us, guys that weren't like the first team All-Americans, to see like, okay, they're treating these guys like real people too. And I think it helped to humble them too, because it's like, listen, man, you don't get one without the other. Even if you leave without your degree, you still got to be eligible to play this season. So I didn't really see a huge difference.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess the bottom line is, and I mean, some of it plays into age too, but you have to be, you're getting a scholarship. If you are getting a scholarship and you're kind of focused on your sport, and I think there's different stories. I was talking to one guy, he played football in college as well, and he said, looking back, he wishes there was maybe more of like a workshop, maybe a 4-week workshop or curriculum, like a semester that athletes had to take. They kind of guided them looking at the future, like, okay, well, when you're done, you had a great career, that's fantastic, but you have, another 40, 50 years of maybe working or, whatever you might go into. And so with that, if they had that education on the, that talked about mental health, financial literacy, all that, it would have been very helpful.
By all means. And for us, I mean, the first time that I can actually say, and I share this a lot, like the first time I actually heard of any sort of financial literacy, whether it's doing taxes or budgeting or anything like that, aside from my mom yelling at me about it, was it was our personal family finance class. And it was my junior year in college. So, we didn't learn that stuff coming up. And now, kind of transitioning, not to get ahead of us here, but when it comes to things like NIL, I feel like that piece is probably more needed now than ever in terms of how kids make money, how they use the money, what the money can be used for, how to store things away. Those are things that we didn't get until, at least for me, until my junior year in college. And I mean, I loved that class. It was great. It was awesome. It taught me a lot. But to get that instilled a little bit sooner, looking back, I think that would have been a huge benefit to a lot of us.
Yeah, no doubt. And I mean, that's a perfect segue to talk about NIL, name, image, likeness. But yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I hear from, I guess, a negative perspective, is just a need for more education. And it's all new. I mean, when you were playing and other people, older people playing, it wasn't around yet, but there's probably other forms of an NIL type thing. But I think now more than ever, there's that need for the education, especially in the financial literacy part.
Without question. And I think, to a degree, even though I haven't seen it much, I don't see it much at the D2 level where I'm coaching now. But I think maybe for the first few years of this whole NIL thing, which, if I'm honest, I opposed it at the very beginning just because I didn't know what it was. And in all fairness, there's really no huge regulation on it. For me, I think those first few years, maybe coaches, players, parents got a real rude awakening about what that actually means and what actually comes with it. So I think the education piece of that sort of thing is something a lot of guys, even in my position, even past the days of, whenever they had the NCAA EA Sports game and things like that, and I got my letter that said, hey, you appeared in these games. If you did, write this, and maybe we can send you some money. Even past that thing, it's there's an education piece that I think this is a good segue for the higher leagues and the teams in the leagues of this nature to really open up the conversation, because that too does translate beyond football,
Yeah, no doubt. And I think even you kind of alluded to it a little bit. I think even it's at a lower level, lower meaning like starting at like at least high school, of starting to educate, especially now, because I mean, there's a lot of states where athletes can benefit from NIL in their state as a high school athlete. So that's even more important at that point. I heard one story, and I think the guy was already in college, but he got some kind of a deal, maybe like $30,000-$40,000 deal. And so he ended up doing it. He got the money, he spent the money with his friends, But unfortunately, what happened was it took him to the next threshold financially, which took his scholarship away. And that, that should never happen. I mean, that's pretty sad. So I think that's, again, back to just the whole education side. People need to understand what they need to do.
Right. And, and if I'm honest, I'm not fully educated on myself either when it comes to scholarships. Plus, I mean, for us, like a scholarship check, I think was back in the day a little over $800 a month or something like that, something small compared to what it is now.
Right.
But to add on NIL, things like that, and essentially the transfer portal, things like that, kids are looking to go where the most money is at times. And it's now, I think Deion Sanders said it best. He's like, now you've got to deal with kids who have money in terms of the amateurism of things. But it's a battle, I think, that's in its infancy, and I'm hoping something's being done. I don't think it's a bad idea. It's growing on me. You know what I mean, Rob? It's growing on me now. I like the idea. But I'd rather it be something more than just an idea. I'd like to see that be something more regulated and to the point when it comes to these kids and how they can really benefit the rest of their lives and their families.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, even from a social media perspective, which is a huge part of that, with all the followers and all that, just knowing how to use it the right way. Because I mean, we've all seen some of these stories of these kids, and not just athletes, but kids in general, just kind of saying stupid things because they don't know any better, and then it comes back to haunt them later when they get older.
Yeah, and I actually know I know some people that are associated with that little boy, Baby Gronk. And just kind of the marketing and the image of things that are going on for him. And I think he's maybe like 9, 10, 11 years old, something like that, visiting these schools, and they're talking to him. And for him, he doesn't hear things like publicity stunt. He doesn't hear things like scholarship really at his age. But for him, I sometimes worry about the image that's in his mind of just kind of what the reality of this monster is, because he's talking to some pretty major people. And my worry is, well, along with like the financial literacy, because there's money that comes with this social media thing and marketing, is he being taught things like how to answer grown man questions? Because this is a grown man's game and it's a business, and to put that on a kid that age, especially, not saying we have to learn financial literacy at 9 or 10 years old, but that concerns me a little bit.
Well, not only that, I think even like in the sense, probably the parents too, just to be educated on it, because not that they don't understand the financing, but just understanding what this comes into play, and just knowing, paying the taxes and things like that.
Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about alumni engagement. And obviously this is something that's near and dear to us at Alumni Direct, is just trying to get not only athletes, alumni in general, but like engage with each other. And so when you were at Missouri, were athletes coming back, and not just for like the golf tournaments and things like that, but were they coming back and working with the other athletes, not necessarily on the field, but maybe like just talking about mentoring them or talking about jobs or careers? Did you see any of that when you were there?
Oh, sure I did. So a lot of those guys, even if they didn't, come to talk football or just hang out or anything, some actually joined our total person program to where it was benefiting all the student athletes. I remember when I went on my little visit thing to Mizzou because I mean, my story, I bugged all the Mizzou coaches over email because that's what we had back in the day, until they finally gave me a shot. I sent them some high school film, and then here I was. They invited me to a practice. I think it was a bowl practice, but there was a guy, Brad Ekwuekwu. He is now, I believe he's up in the Omaha area. Great guy. And I look to that guy for a lot of different things. I'll follow him on LinkedIn, things like that. But that is a guy, one, hard last name to pronounce, but he was also a wide receiver, a guy who I wanted to be like. And then I remember that day I came to visit and looked at that practice, and he was standing on the sideline with me, just chopping it up, talking with me. And really just became a mentor of mine, even though he wasn't there my entire 4 years or anything like that. He was going on with like the Chiefs, the Rams. He actually was on Hard Knocks at some point. But guys like that, like they would come back just to, and he worked in our total person program there at the athletic department building that at our MATSI, our Mizzou Athletic Training Complex. But just guys who would come back like that just to, make sure that if they had someone to check in on, like, hey, I'll be the person. or just, hey, I'll work with you when it comes to building your career, building your portfolio, all these different things. We just had it. That's just how things were back then. Whether it was them, or I think a lot of the people who were in our athletics department were Mizzou athletic alums to some degree in all sports. So for them, just wanting, Mizzou is such an inviting place, you know what I mean, to come back and do all those things. I think it helped that they created an atmosphere where, it was comfortable to come back. Like, we're not going to shun you away. We want you to come back. We want people to see your face. We want you to tell about your experiences. Things are changing around here. We want you to, help these guys and girls stay grounded. So you would see that a lot. You would see them come to practices. You would see them talk to us in the huddle at practice or anything. Like, you'd see them giving speeches in front of the team. You would see all kinds of different things.
No, that's great. And I think, the athletes definitely need to tap into that. I mean, I guess today, do you, like, from your perspective, do they reach out at all to you, or is it more, you think, up to kind of the alumni to reach out?
It's twofold. I think it's a little bit of both. For me, I know that the staff that's there right now, the football staff that's there, I can speak from my perspective. They aren't Mizzou folks. I know one guy, he actually coached a guy I played with at Mizzou in the receiving room. But it's more or less, if they, and this is not to say anything bad about them, it's more or less if they know you, then they'll reach out. The old phrase, hey, it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's actually who knows you in
Right.
this scenario. And for me, I've done a lot of reaching out because eventually, yeah, I would love to be back in my alma mater. I'd love to coach there. I'd love to be part of the total person program, or what they call it now. I'd love to be part of what made me in the place that made me who I am. But to a degree, yeah, there's a lot of, reaching out on my part just to make sure, like, hey, I'm staying connected. And that's what this whole networking thing is, right? I definitely feel that it's not that they don't want to. It's just, when you step into a program that wasn't,
Yeah.
yours at the bare roots that you helped grow, that does present a pretty big challenge in terms of alumni relations. You got to know who these people are. You got to know who that person is when they walk in, that guy, that girl. It's a pretty big challenge. But for me, I think they are doing a pretty good job about it. I mean, everything from our little get-togethers during the spring game, they'll just say, hey, we're going to have another big reunion, and you get to see all the guys you played with. You get to see the guys that coached you. You get to be social with them, just talk about everything that's happened since you played, family, work, all the things. And I can't speak for all other sports, but I think, for what it's worth, with this new regime, I think right now, and things like the Tiger Scholarship Fund, and they're now putting satellite locations in like St. Louis and Kansas City, it's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. But I have heard, if I'm honest, like, you know what? I don't know what we're doing in terms of alumni relations. I don't really hear anything. No one emails me, calls me. I've heard those things. I just think
Right.
it's building.
Yeah, and I think you hit it on the head. I think it's a lot of it has to do with with the environment and the culture and the coaching staff, because to your point, if you've got this great coaching staff that was there when you as a player was there, and then all of a sudden they're not there anymore, this new staff, they might see your name on the wall or in the program that you're an alumni, but not,
Sure.
they don't have that direct connection to you.
Right. And again, here I am. I am definitely, I'm a guy who's trying to build connections. Like that's my big thing. And my coaches described me as a social butterfly whenever I was in college, man. And they're not wrong. They're not. And for me, I've used networking, I've used connections, things like that, to make sure that I stay plugged into, I guess, my nucleus, whether it's my faith or just, my school that I came from. It's one of those things where if I don't see it, I create it. And it's not me trying to bulldog my way in or out of a situation. It's just, this is what I love to do, and this is the place that I love, and I want to stay connected.
I'll tell you what, it's kind of crazy, but like you're reading my mind, because like you're answering questions before I'm asking the question, which is great. So, but no, I think you're right. I mean, it's you're the perfect example of how it should be, because I know I've talked to former agents and coaches and things like that, and they say the best time to network and connect is when you're still playing, because you're active, because you hear these stories about the athletes got nose to the grindstone. They play out their career, maybe professionally, and all of a sudden they're done. Like, okay, here we go. And they're like, well, you didn't build that network of those relationships when you had more of a chance to do it. So you're almost kind of starting from scratch.
Yeah, and you never really know what connections you're actually making whenever you're actually doing it. I mean, I know entrepreneurs, I know owners, I know inventors, like all of those guys were in the locker room with me. And, I've met Hall of Fame coaches, Hall of Fame players that like I literally have these guys' phone number. It's crazy to me. Like I see them as regular people, but then you step back and you're like, man, like this is the network that I've built. And I mean, I'm blessed to have been a part of the network I have been, and it's taken me different places. But for me, you never really know the type of folks that you're around. And not that I'm trying to just make the best impression and put on a show and all of these different things. I'm not a salesman. I'm not going to sell snake oil. I'm not that guy. I'm just me. And anytime I've tried to be anyone else, I've gotten in trouble. But for me, you never really know what connections that you do have, whether that's a connection just to something you need or something that someone else needs. Um, and I think I've got a pretty good mixture of that from every place that I've been beginning at Mizzou, maybe even high school.
And I'll tell you what, those are great nuggets for people listening to the show, because I think it is so important to network and connect, and even like you said, starting at a high school level, because ultimately too, like the people that you meet, you never know who they know too. So it could be something that you met this person, and whether it's you're starting a business, you're looking for a job, whatever it might be. People are there to help you, and I think if you reach out to them and build relationships, it's definitely important. So let's talk a little bit about transitioning out of sports. So that's obviously the topic of the show, and we've given some great advice to people. But talk a little bit about your transition out of playing football, and maybe give some advice to fellow athletes.
I think mine was a lot easier than most. I feel like a lot of times those come to an abrupt end, and then you hit like a couple stages of depression of, man, what do I do next? And man, it's over. Like all those things kind of hit people. I really didn't get that sense. So for me, after I left, and again, I wasn't the most high profile guy, but I did, I got invited to things like the regional combine up in Chicago at the Bears facility. Worked out there. I did, the arena thing, and I emailed back and forth. So this is kind of a crazy story. So a friend of mine, he was on the same path as me. He went to Cornell up in Iowa. He went to a camp in Florida, and I guess he kind of got scammed. I don't know who the guy was, claimed to be an agent, whatever. But my guy sold his car, everything to get down there, and ended up the camp really didn't filter them out the way that they were supposed to have said they did. And then, they did leave with something, which was numbers to every NFL front office that they could get. And so he dropped those lines to me, and I had an agent at the time. Nothing really came of it. When I first, got him, I ended up dropping that agent, but I ended up getting another one. And by that time, I had already called every single NFL front office. Some remembered me, some didn't. From Pro Day when I did that at Mizzou, some remember me in practice, like, oh yeah, I remember you, number 80, yeah, like, oh, like those different things, like, and that which felt good. So, I emailed back and forth with some called. I remember getting a call from the then Washington Redskins, and they were just saying, hey, you still working out? Here's the deal. And it was like them, the Chiefs, the Raiders, and I think the Browns and Redskins at the time that said, hey, like if somebody goes down at training camp, we're going to give you a call. Just make sure you're healthy, all those different things. Those calls never came. And that's okay. Because in the meantime, I was working in the mental health field, and that was its own beast. But I was also doing things like volunteer coaching for Police Athletic League and things like that. So for me, I never really left the game. I guess you could say I could still run around. I could still run the routes. I could still coach. I could still give suggestions. I could still do the life coaching. I could still do those things that I was doing as a player. But now it just transitioned into something different. So whenever the calls stopped coming, whenever I was like, man, I'm tired of getting rammed into this doggone wall in this tiny little astroturf field in this arena from wherever I'm at, it just didn't hurt as much. The call stopped, but there was always an opportunity to stay involved. And I figured, you know what? Most people saw me more of like a coach or a mentor or something like that anyway, even when I was playing. Maybe this is something that I'm good at. And I didn't want to be a coach at first, but then it started to really sink in. So for me, it was probably a lot easier than most, where it wasn't like an injury that stopped me when I was on the up and coming. It wasn't a bad circumstance in life that really just kind of threw me off. It was an easier transition, I guess you could say. Did it sting? Yeah, but I also had a pretty good support system. I had my kids, I had my mom, I had whoever was with me coaching, and it helped. And being able to transition someone to think like, oh, that's why that coach did this with me, to now okay, this is why I'm going to have to do the same thing with this kid. Those sort of realizations kind of fixed my focus onto what was next, and it just happened the way it did.
So what would be the biggest advice that you could give to athletes, and even thinking about now as a coach, and because obviously you're coaching these athletes, and most of them, the 99.5% or whatever, that aren't going to go on, what kind of advice would you give them as they prepare for life after sports?
Figure out what you're good at. And for me, that doesn't mean a job. Like, are you good at carpentry? Are you good at all the, it could mean those things, but are you a good communicator? Do you know how to talk to people? Are you better with your hands? Are you someone who gives advice? Are you someone who takes advice? Are you someone, like, what is it that people say about you? Because to me, I'm not that great of a coach if it doesn't produce in the type of person that comes out in these athletes. I mean, screw the athletic part. That's cool.
Right.
But the fruits of what that is going to come from exactly how these kids turn out. And, when they come back years later, like, coach, thank you. I see why you said that. And things that I've done with other coaches. But for me, it's figuring out what you're good at. Are you good at writing? Are you good at talking? Are you good at caring for other people? Are you good with kids? Like, what are the things that you're just naturally good at? And I get it. You may have a business degree, but how can you turn what you're good at into a business? It's just connecting all the dots that you've also, put together over time. So it's not, okay, now I've got to figure out something new. It's basically just taking, what do I actually have? Like, what do I actually got in my toolbox? What am I good at? To really just kind of take you to the next step. Because 9 times out of 10, whether you think so or not, you've probably been doing those things the entire time that you've been an athlete, and they've probably gotten better, and you've probably had experiences that you think, may or may not have shaped you a certain way. But now you can, now you have the opportunity to go and do something like that for yourself, your family, or someone else in your realm. So figure out what you're good at. If you figure that part out, it makes it a lot easier. Like, it hits a lot different than thinking, man, this is over and I have to start from ground zero.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, that's the biggest thing is knowing kind of what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and just kind of going for it. Because it's a shame you hear stories about a lot of athletes. It's kind of like, okay, I'm the football player, I'm the baseball player, I'm the swimmer, the tennis player, and that's the way they see themselves. They don't see themselves as the person, and that's one thing that needs to come across. So, talk a little about what you're doing today. Share about how you're going to make your team a powerhouse and all that.
Well, I mean, hey, that we had a saying back at my last school, Alumni University in KC, hey, special teams, special players. So I am the assistant special teams coordinator here at the University of Central Missouri, and I also help out with the secondary. I actually get to work under Coach Jones. He was my freshman offensive line coach at Ray Peck High School whenever I first got there my freshman year back in '03. I was an offensive lineman. Yes, I was, and I was a monster. I just got skinny and they got bigger. But I get to work with him. He's our DC now. So it works for me. Again, it's like those connections that you have, right? So right now, that's what I'm doing. I'm also still involved in the community. Like, I have a heart for the community, man. I want to see kids. I want to see, and I think right now, I mean, I've worked with youth and things like that for pretty much the better part of the past 12 years since I graduated. But I think for me, my heart right now is just that awkward age between, shoot, I got to become somebody now and actually becoming that person. And that's that high school to college. Uh, well, I wouldn't say that. I would say that college to college graduate sort of age frame right there. I think that's where my heart is right now. So for me, taking things that I've gotten with my master's in and educational and counseling psychology, and really just tapping into the mindset and things like that. Like, for me, I would love to go back to school. Wink, wink. I'm here, and get another degree. I would, just because for me, my goal is to do the sports psychology route. And I think that could help me be a better coach. Obviously, I want to be a coach the rest of my career, but for right now, I'm taking those steps. I'm starting to realize there's a journey involved in all this. It's not just snap my fingers and make it happen. So apart from coaching, I'm also part of Sports Philanthropy Network. So essentially, for anyone that doesn't know what it is, or if they, think they may have an idea, I kind of equate it to like when you're in college and you have those academic fraternities, a whole bunch of people, smart people that get together for one cause. They come together, they network, they work together, they learn from each other, they study, they do all these things. That's what I do. I'm one of the co-directors of the Kansas City chapter. So for me, marrying my loves of sports and philanthropy, forming task forces like, you know, diversity, concussions, women in sports, whatever the thing is in the community where I come from, that's something that I'm pretty passionate about doing, and that's what I'm doing right now, along with coaching here at UCM. So for me, it's more or less tapping into. It doesn't look the way a lot of people think it would. The journey's been a little bit different, but for me, I am focused now on really stepping into what it is that I'm actually good at, and to be honest, networking got me here, but it's something that kind of came natural to me. I got contacted by Sports Philanthropy Network during the draft in Kansas City. They said, come to this happy hour. We'd love to talk to you. You're going to be my guest. Okay, I guess I'm coming. And then one thing led to another, and just hearing the things that I can do in the community and bringing people together for sports, whether that's golly, athletes, coaches, publicists, uh, financial literacy coaches, whoever you can think of, and they just love sports and they love what sports can do. That right there is enough for anybody to come to me and say, hey man, sports are just games, and for me to just shun them to the side and be like, man, this is much bigger, and this is what we can do with sports. So I think right now what's going on with me is essentially stepping into my own element and really just diving into those things that I'm actually good at, things that don't feel like work, things that don't feel like I have to force. And to be honest, baseline for me is hard work. So, I mean, you can tell me I'm working hard or working all these hours, but to me, this is just what I do, baby. That's it. It's what I do. And I think that I'm in a perfect spot right now to actually put those things to use.
And that's great. And I was fortunate to meet Terrance through Sports Philanthropy Network. I'm a myself a director in the South Florida market. We encourage people to go out to Sports Philanthropy Network in the different markets because we want to make a true impact on these communities, like Terrance mentioned. So, how can people find you today?
So you can find me anywhere, man. I'm on Instagram. It's Coach_T Dennis. And I'm on Twitter. That's just Coach T Dennis. I made this super easy. You know what I mean? Like Coach T Dennis. That's it. But I'm also on LinkedIn, just Terrance Dennis. You'll find me there, assistant special teams coordinator with UCM, University of Central Missouri. And I'm always willing to sit down, talk, figure out another stream of, how to get word out, income, whatever you want to talk about. That's why I'm here. And I love doing these sit downs right here, just so, it's not about my face getting out there. It's more or less just about, what we're talking about, the substance of everything. So I think, if you want to get a hold of me, man, just get a hold of me. That's it. I'll talk to me. I'll talk back.
No, and that's great. We'll put all that in the show notes as well. And you can find us at alumnidirect.com. You can also find us on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram, all those different areas. But, look for the show and follow the show. There's so much great content and so many great athletes that I've had on, like Terrance, and they tell such a great story. And I think if all together, we can definitely make an impact. So you can follow that on our Alumni Direct YouTube channel, as well as various podcast networks, as we're across all of them. But thank you again, Terrance. This has been awesome. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I tell you what, kind of a lasting thing. I know I talked about my journey being a little bit different. I've taken different ways to get to where I'm at. It's not a straight line, but I've done a lot of volunteer coaching, whether that's little league all the way up to the college level. So what I'm working on now is not a curriculum, more of a workshop in terms of people who think, like I want to be where that guy's at, or I want to do this. And they don't take volunteering as seriously, or it may not work for them. I'm actually in the process of finalizing sort of a workshop where people can actually hear my voice and sit down and do those things and I can teach them, hey, this is what it means to volunteer coach. Is this something you can do? Is it something you don't want to do? And that'll be dropping here probably within the next 2 weeks. So look for that whenever I publish that on some social media, things like that. Oh, I'm also on TikTok, whatever. I just do this. I just talk. But no, in terms of volunteer coaching, just considering it, not making it a career by any means, because I want you to get paid for what you do, but essentially taking an unorthodox way like I have in the past and just saying, hey, it's worth it. I'm just gonna go all in. I'm gonna go chips all in. So that will be coming out soon, and I will be letting you know, Rob, kind of when that happens too. But apart from that, even the unorthodox, man, I believe in my heart of hearts, if it's worth it, you don't really necessarily care about who says no. You just got to say yes. That's it.
Absolutely. What a great way to end. I mean, I went that whole route with coaching as well, which we can talk about later. But thanks again. Have an awesome day.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you.